Okay, I think we're live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. So, we're trying something new. We've woken up on a Sunday morning to bring you all the news and events from last week. And thank you so much for wanting to skip the news and watch the weekly instead. I have with me Ashish Chandorkar and Srivatsa Subana. Hi, guys. Good morning to you.
Hi, Gary. Morning.
Hi, Carrie. Good morning.
Lovely cold morning in Bangalore. Ashish, you're done with your poha breakfast?
And in Pune, the poha is just on its way. So
Okay, it'll be a well-earned poha, I think, after the weekly. All right. So moving on, before we get started with the news and events of last week, just a quick recap of what we did in terms of podcasts. We had three very good podcasts last week. Uh, I particularly enjoyed hosting Deepak and Nikhil on the UPI podcast. I mean, I think it's probably one of the most comprehensive discussions on UPI that you will ever see, right? Many different aspects were discussed, and what is really positive is the number of use cases that are still yet to be mined, right? And also the whole API led building block sort of a growth that can be emulated in various other spheres of growth as well. So it was really amazing to kind of listen to these guys. And both Nikhil was involved with the conception of UPI, and then Deepak headed growth and product for Paytm, which is one of the largest payments companies in India. So probably two of the best people who you could imagine speaking on such a subject. What's Ashish, your pick for moments from last week?
I'll go first. I think the Nehru Ambedkar Patel episode was really fantastic.
Yeah.
Especially having someone like Abhinav come in and talk about the freedom movement as an amalgamation of different movements, and then going on into detail about why Ambedkar may not have been involved in the mainstream sort of freedom movement, but is considered as one of the architects of modern India. Likewise, the take on Patel and Nehru was also very interesting. Thoroughly enjoyable episode, and I personally learned a lot. So it was like a great lesson in history, a short 1 hour lesson in history.
Yeah, fascinating.
I think this was the best episode in my view of Bharatvaarta. I said it in a couple of groups, and people were saying that's really high praise. But I genuinely felt it was like very educating in its content. The
Right.
Bihar one, obviously, we did a analysis of the elections of Bihar and the bypolls. If you have not heard Rohit on Indian politics, you should hear him. He's not on Twitter, so this is probably the only public platform where he's available. His knowledge of politics and the details is just amazing. And despite not being from the north, he talks about the regions and seats and MLAs and leaders and MPs of any state with a lot of command, and that's quite amazing. So I would encourage you to listen to this episode of what's going to happen in Indian politics after the Bihar and the bypoll results.
Yeah, I just add on to that, especially on Rohit. He'd done a fantastic job with our pre-election episode as well. And his take on how, unfortunately, the mainstream media will not learn from its lessons, I think is very apt. So while people should learn from, what has happened in the election, which has resulted in a comprehensive victory across bypolls and even in Bihar, unfortunately, I don't see a lot changing when it comes to the mainstream media and how they view Indian politics.
Right. All right. So let's quickly move on to the events of last week. The first thing we're going to talk about is the fact that Laxmi Vilas Bank collapsed because of a deteriorating financial situation. The 93-year-old bank was placed under moratorium by the RBI on Thursday. A merger with DBS Bank India will happen in the coming days. The bank collapsed because of a lack of fresh capital, bad corporate sector loans, and governance issues. The RBI has assured depositors that their money is safe. Existing employees will be kept on with their current salaries. This is the fifth Indian financial firm to collapse within the last 30 months. What do you think of this?
So, just to set the context in terms of the history of Lakshmi Vilas Bank, As you mentioned, their asset quality deteriorated. So their gross NPA was around 10% in 2018, and it has now fallen to 25% in 2020. It's a fairly big branch with bank with over 500 branches. The problem started, for Laxmi Vilas Bank when they shifted their focus from SME lending to large businesses. So they loaned out around 720 crores to the promoters of Ranbaxy and Fortis. And what happened was in 2018, Religare Finvest, which is an arm of Religare Enterprises, sued a Delhi branch to recover fixed deposits worth about 800 crores that the bank had invoked to recover loans from the promoters. After which, the bank was placed under the prompt corrective action program of the RBI. So that's when Laxmi Vilas Bank started to look for new investors, mergers, and so on. Their first attempt was to merge with India Bulls Housing Finance, which RBI disapproved because it probably didn't want to be seen as an NBFC acquiring a bank. Uh, Subsequently, there was an attempt even made with Clicks Capital. Clicks Capital had put in a proposal early in October, and in mid-November, because it was taking a lot of time and no decision was made, they even threatened to pull out. But then almost suddenly, you could say, there was a moratorium imposed, which restricted customers from withdrawing money, and then DBS became like the main suitor for Lakshmi Vilas Bank. Uh, so it's very interesting because a foreign bank, a subsidiary of a foreign bank, has been asked to take over an Indian bank. So I think there are a few things that come out of it, few messages. One is that I think RBI is clearly looking at foreign banks to set up subsidiaries, and might actually give them the option to take up failed banks in case they set up subsidiaries, versus those foreign banks who seek a branch license and they want to operate the India business as a branch. This, I think, comes from the 2008 crisis, where there were some fears that cities India business was at risk because of some of the bets placed by Citibank in US in terms of mortgage-backed securities and so on. So probably RBI looks at this as a way to safeguard the Indian banking system and economy. The other interesting thing, both with Lakshmi Vilas Bank and earlier Yes Bank deal, is that the existing shareholders have been kind of wiped out. So it's not a conventional mergers in that sense. So overall, denying India Bulls a chance. So I think that's a clear message that to NBFCs, that banking license through acquisition may not come easy. Although there's been a recent development where there's been a
Yeah.
recommendation made to allow some of the larger NBFCs who have been in operation for 10 years or more to take up to give them a banking license. Yeah, so that's to be informed. So they don't expect that this will happen smoothly. They expect legal challenges, but the framework is there in place to deal with it. So it may not, the entire merger may not happen as smoothly as some people think. It might take a little bit more time.
All right, that was very comprehensive. Ashish, what is the broader significance of this? Maybe we should do a podcast on banking itself, right? There's plenty of content to discuss.
No, absolutely. In fact, beyond this situation, which by the way RBI handled quite well, the moratorium was placed for about a month, and it took only about 30 minutes for them to announce that DBS was going to acquire Lakshmi Vilas Bank. So tough Diwali for some negotiators in RBI and the two banks, but I guess they basically made sure that there was no PMC bank type situation here. But more importantly and more significantly, there was a recommendation by a RBI internal working group, which has proposed a complete overhaul of the banking system. We need to have a greater financialization in India, where people, Indian citizens hold more financial assets rather than physical assets. And for that, the banking system has to permeate and penetrate deep inside the country, which of course has not happened, despite all that being one of the objectives of nationalization in 1969. And this RBI working group has proposed that they would they would essentially amend the Banking Regulation Act of 1949, which gives RBI the power to license banks to have regulation and control over the shareholding, voting rights, appointment of directors and management boards, all of that. And they would then allow large corporate houses to get banking licenses. They've also said that large NBFCs can become banks, and payment banks can become small finance banks. So, fairly broad recommendations. In fact, this would be the biggest banking reform if it gets there. I mean, this is just an RBI internal working group. It has to be approved by RBI itself, and then, of course, by the government. And but if this happens, it will be like a complete overhaul. Remains to be seen what we do with the foreign banks in that case. But also, given that we are now consolidating PSBs and potentially have only 4 large banks in another 5-6 years or maybe 10 years, uh, these regulations will help the M&A activity. So once the government has created a significant mass on having, let's say, 4-5 large banks and perhaps a few small banks which may not get merged, they can later be sold off to the private players who might come in through this route.
All right. Moving on. So Twitter apologized after showing Ladakh as part of China, right? The company tendered a written apology to the Joint Committee of Parliament. This comes after the social media platform geotagged users in Ladakh as being in China. Twitter later clarified that it was caused by a software error combined with imperfect data, within quotes. The company said that it was reviewing other geotags in J&K and that the accurate information will be available by 30th of November, end of this month. Twitter has treated India as a priority market and said that it was committed to partnering with the government and METI. So, Ashish, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, quite strange for Twitter to get its product wrong, but then that's what they have done with great ease and finesse for the last 14 years. Uh, this came up through Nitin Gokhale, who's a veteran journalist and the editor-in-chief of Strat News Global. He was visiting Ladakh a couple of weeks ago, and then that's where he found that the locations were misleading, and he put out a Twitter video from the site from Ladakh showing that how it was being shown as China. And that is when the Joint Parliamentary Committee took it up. Meenakshi Lekhi, the BJP MP from Delhi, she asked Twitter to depose in front of the committee, and Twitter has accepted the error now. It's a little funny because see, I've said this on Twitter earlier also that the importance of having maps is and globes produced in India is understated. What happens is, see, just look around us in our own corporate environments, or the kind of maps which we see on various third party sites. The slices of Kashmir are always shown as Pakistan or China, right? I mean, some sites do acknowledge that there is a disputed territory, quote unquote, which obviously from an Indian perspective is wrong, because we have all of J&K as per our official map. So and Ladakh, I mean, now of course there are two different union territories. So the issue can only be resolved if India takes control of the map making market itself, which today is not the case. Today, bulk of the globe export or the printed maps export happens from China. And I mean, with all the Atmanirbhar discussion, I would actually argue that this should be one of the highest priorities of the government, to take control of the market. It is not a very big, I mean, it's not a very specialized market, can be easily, attacked as such. But until that happens, we need to enforce our IT Act. I mean, the act around the representing Indian symbols very stridently, because increasingly you see that Indian representation is now not correct on most of the Western sites, and unless we really act on it, people will not know what. I mean, unfortunately, it's not just the people outside India; it is also the Indians who have now forgot what India looks like, and it's getting into a territory where people don't know where to find the right maps. So this is a broader issue. I mean, good that we have acted on Twitter to kind of render this apology. but there's much more to it, and much more needs to be done.
Right. All right. So moving on to another social media platform, uh, Parler saw 2000% growth during the US elections. The sudden growth came between November 7th and November 9th, with the app surpassing 500,000 downloads by the 9th. Right now, the user base is mainly comprised of Trump supporters. Well, okay. And Twitter and Facebook have been aggressive with their content policing solutions during the election. Parler, on the other hand, has a very hands-off approach to content moderation. This could promote the spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories, apparently. So, Srivatsa, what do you think about this? Vatsa, you're on mute.
I know. That's why I
Yeah.
shut up immediately. So yeah, I mean, Parler is a interesting sort of platform, in the sense it can probably be called, a very bare bones kind of version of Twitter, where your news feed is chronological. There's no curation. They don't run any algorithms on the actual news feed, and it's become popular, as you mentioned, after during that election week, and now probably has around 8 million users. Nowhere close to Twitter. Twitter probably has more than 300, 350
Yeah.
million users. And also, Parler does not advertise. They don't, and the search functionality is limited, so you can only search by hashtag. So it's a fairly rudimentary version of Twitter in that sense. And the reason, as you mentioned, people are registering with Parler is because it guarantees them quote unquote free speech, in the sense that there's no censorship, there's no regulation as such. which a lot happens on Twitter. And somewhere I think Twitter, Facebook, all of these apps, through their own actions, they have given birth to an app like Parler. So, and Twitter itself has been very inconsistent in the sense, in the way it implements its policies. You can see some viral videos of Ted Cruz where he's asking sort of difficult questions of Jack Dorsey. But just to give an example, when Donald Trump made a claim that the election, he's won the election, there was a very prompt rejoinder put there saying that this is under dispute, or he's been cheated. Again, there was a rejoinder put there. But when the same thing happened in India, where the EVMs are routinely sort of mocked after each election, and they say EVM is every vote to Modi, or that the BJP has stolen elections, there are no such disclaimers or rejoinders added there. So there's no consistency in terms of the way Twitter implements its policies. And more importantly, I don't think anyone even knows how they decide something is fake news, or how something is questionable. The fact checking algorithms are not public. So I think earlier this year, and Balaji has been saying this a lot, that fact checking needs to go the way of open source software.
Exactly.
And the algorithms that are used for fact checking, because it's humanly not possible to check every tweet whether it's factually correct or not, so it has to be done through algorithms. If you try to do it humanly, again there's a latency issue, things will get delayed, and fake news might actually spread by the time you decide to classify something as fake news. So overall, this is an other extreme approach where you say I'm completely hands off. But that in itself, I think, will create its own set of challenges. We saw how in the middle of last decade, how Twitter, Facebook, etc. were used by some extremist groups like ISIS to recruit people. So platforms cannot take a completely hands-off approach when it comes to the content on their website. There is obviously a need for some regulation, and there is a need to make the whole fact checking, the censorship process more transparent, so that people, based on ideology, at least this idea does not come that people are censored based on ideology.
No, it's a very difficult problem to solve, certainly, I would say. But then, I mean, the first instinct to solve the solution should not have been on the content or publishing aspect of things. I mean, I think it should have been a more technological problem. It should have been a more infra problem. And the platforms should have acted as platforms. But I mean, I think now we're too far down that line, because I think, during the parliamentary committee depositions itself, I mean, Dorsey said that Twitter is a platform, but then Cruz proved very convincingly that even though they're a platform, they're acting like a publishing house, right? So yeah, I mean, interesting times ahead, and I think regulation is only I mean, definitely inevitable in that regard. Ashish, as a Parler user, what is your experience?
Yeah, I joined Parler last week. It seems a bit like an echo chamber. I think a lot of people don't understand and appreciate this enough, that the social media, for all its follies and all its criticism, actually is attractive because there are people to criticize. If you were all staying with folks who had the same viewpoint, social media would lose its charm quite rapidly. And right now, the way Parler, I have actually followed everyone who follows me, so I see a very conformist timeline in that sense. Also, right now, a lot of people are putting Twitter screenshots on Parler, essentially their own tweets and link to their own tweets. So I think it's not really a platform of choice for India. And of course, as Vatsa says, the UI, etc., is quite rudimentary. But eventually, people miss this point that it is not about, I mean, ideological control, quote unquote, is not about not having the other ideology. People want to win after an argument, but the platform like Parlers do not have I mean, there's no one to counter there. So not sure how long these platforms will stick and grow.
All right, but as a true social media influencer, you're everywhere.
New platform, new ID, yes, of course.
All right. So you can catch C. Ashish on Parler, and I think Vatsa and I will be joining soon, of course. Hopefully, right?
Yeah,
Vatsa?
Bharatvaarta is already on Parler. So
Okay, follow us on Parler already, right? If
yeah,
you're on
please
Parler.
do follow us on Parler as well.
Right. So moving on to some grim news, the CRPF killed 4 Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorists in an encounter at Nagrota. These terrorists were planning to derail the District Development Council poll and disrupt the election process. Along with 7.5 kg of RDX, the CRPF also found an arsenal of weapons and explosives with the terrorists. Most of the terrorists' equipment was made in Pakistan. The Prime Minister Modi mentioned that they were planning an attack on the anniversary of 26/11, which is just around the corner. Pakistani agencies have been on high alert after J&K was declared a union territory last year. Ashish, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a good success for Indian Armed Forces. See, Nagrota is had also already seen an attack in 2016. If you remember, there were in November, end of November 2016, there was a attack there on our army base where we had lost seven of our seven of our soldiers, including I think couple of officers. So this place has been on the radar of the militants for a while. I think what worked well on in this case was, it looks like our intelligence system worked quite flawlessly. The militants were probably lured into the Indian territory, and then they were essentially intercepted, and their truck was attacked and eliminated. Joint operation between CRPF, Indian Army, and the Kashmir Police. Um, like what there's probably much more than what meets the eye here. I mean, if you see, PM actually put out 2 tweets talking about this attack. He seldom talks about
Yeah, it's very uncharacteristic of him, right?
Exactly. So there was definitely something more than what meets the eye here. I mean, they potentially, although the official line is that they were trying to attack the district polls in the UT of Jammu and Kashmir, it is probably something much more than that. In fact, there has been a Twitter chatter that there are other teams of JEM which have also been activated, etc., and security forces are hunting for them. So we don't know that, or there's no official word on it, of course. But it's a reminder that Pakistan will not stop its nefarious designs. I mean, whatever happens in FATF, etc., and the optics of putting the culprits of 26/11 behind bars. I mean, all of that is essentially just very very optical from Pakistan, and we cannot let the guard down with a prospect of a two-front war very much alive even now. And even in this case, it was actually Masood Azhar's kin, Abdul Rauf, who was supposed to be the handler of these 4 people who we gunned down. So, despite the fact that Masood Azhar has been, apparently, jailed, etc., obviously that's not really it's not really showing up in terms of results as far as Indian terrorism situation is concerned. So, but this is a good success. The fact that they were carrying Pakistani-made electronics equipment with messages around their location, I think some of that should be helpful for Indian armed forces. Very interestingly, I think there was some OS sent on Twitter about how the company which makes these devices is actually located inside the Kant area of Lahore. So we know from the British legacy that Kant areas are not available for commercial enterprise, right? Like you can't have a company house there. But apparently the company which manufactured these devices is actually inside the Kant, which means it's essentially a Pakistani army operation. So hopefully some of this will give us new cues to look at what kind of designs are Pakistani army creating for destabilizing Indian elections and other events.
Right. It does bring back memories, actually. I mean, thankfully, I mean, we haven't had these kind of attacks and so on and so forth, like the kinds we saw during the 2005, 6, and especially the 10, 11 era, right? And it brings to mind what someone said, that they only have to be right once, right? So yeah, let's hope that we're all safe and sound, and more power to our Indian Army as well. Moving on. So the BPCL disinvestment has moved to the second phase. The government has received multiple expressions of interest in the bidding process of Bharat Petroleum. The qualifying bidder will have a controlling stake in BPCL and 25.77% of India's fuel retailing market share. The government is selling its stake in the company as part of plans to raise 2.1 lakh crores. However, there is low interest in the campaign, mainly because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the crash in global crude oil prices, right? Vatsa, you've been tracking this. What are your thoughts?
Carrie, I was just checking if I was on mute before I spoke. I think, we know that there are 3 or 4 players who have expressed interest, of whom Vedanta is one. Vedanta, had acquired Kane's India business nearly a decade ago. So that explains their interest. The government is planning to sell its entire stake, which is around close to 53%. There's a plan to raise 2.1 lakh crores from disinvestments this year. That was the original plan. We don't know who the other investors are at this stage, and Vedanta has said that they'll float a SPV for this purpose. This would cost them around, based on last week's price, somewhere close to 45,000 crores, and they will also have to buy the public stake, which is another 26%, which is held by the public. So at this stage, it's just the EOI that has been received. Then that evaluating that will probably take a few weeks or a month, and then a formal RFP will be asked for. It is kind of surprising that Reliance has not bid for this, because Reliance does have a small retail business in addition to its petroleum refining business, but it seems that they have not bid. Neither has Aramco, which is the largest oil company in the world. So yeah, we need to see. I mean, how this goes on, and at what price it is finally sold. Uh, so that's they're planning to conclude the sale by the end of the financial year, which is around March. So yeah, let's wait and watch, and hope that the government gets the best deal for this disinvestment.
I think, Carrie, the timing of both the flagship disinvestments has gone awry, BPCL as well as Air India. Those are 2 businesses which have been really impacted by COVID. And the problem with the oil business is that there could be a long-term trend here in terms of companies not putting in more money for expansion, etc. And retailing also is not an easy business. It's not an upstream business where these companies already hold competency in. Retailing, any B2C business needs its own skill sets, etc. And that's not where companies like Aramco, ADNOC, etc. have been playing. So let's hope that this gets done. But the probability of the government realizing a good valuation may actually be quite small here. And the fact that there could only be two or three people left, or two or three bidders left to buy the stake eventually, may actually show off in the valuations. So bad timing, but I think government should still go ahead and get this done, because that's also a signaling mechanism that we are serious about government not operating some of these firms which are not really core to the national security interests.
All right. So before we sign off for the week, just a special announcement. Anuradha Goel ji, who we spoke to on podcast number 44 or 43, I'm not very sure, along with Karan Karyappa on travel in India, has a new book coming out. So the book is based on deities, temples, festivals, rituals, art, architecture, many other things, and basically aimed at bringing an understanding towards all of this civilizational, cultural aspects through travel. Seems very, very interesting. Anuradha ji is a award-winning travel writer, and she blogs at indetails.com. Do check that out as well. So go check out her book. We'll link her book in the description on the podcast. Do check it out, and yeah. So that was that. Guys, we're at the end of the podcast. We're at the end of sorry, not the podcast, the weekly, right? So this was fun. I think it was a good, tight session on a bunch of things that happened, right? Looking forward to more podcasts next week. We'll announce them shortly, right? And you guys have a great week ahead. Stay safe, take care, and enjoy.